June 1942. Tobruk, North Africa. The fine sand coating the exhaust manifold of the Macchi C.202 sizzled as Sergeant Paolo Rinaldi wiped sweat from his brow. After 14 hours of continuous work, the fighter's engine still wouldn't start properly. His toolbox, once containing 78 precision tools when he'd left Sicily 6 months earlier, now held just 31 mismatched wrenches and pliers. The rest had broken without replacement or been fabricated into makeshift alternatives. The squadron had cannibalized 3 damaged aircraft that month to keep 5 flying. Mussolini's promises of supply line efficiency had evaporated in the desert heat. Across Italian North Africa that summer, 2,317 mechanics like Rinaldi struggled to maintain the Regia Aeronautica's aircraft with dwindling resources. Their training at Italy's prestigious Caserta Technical Academy had prepared them for precision work with proper equipment, not desert improvisation with sand-contaminated oil and salvage parts. These men discovered a reality that contradicted everything fascist propaganda had taught them about Italian industrial might. They confronted daily evidence that Italian supply chains had collapsed while British logistics somehow maintained operational aircraft despite the same desert conditions. The morning alarm sounded at 4:30 a.m. British forces had broken through defensive positions 17 kilometers east. Rinaldi and his team frantically tried to evacuate their 3 remaining operational fighters. Only one successfully took off before strafing hurricanes appeared overhead. The maintenance crew dove for foxholes as rounds impacted around them, perforating fuel drums that erupted into towers of flame. When the firing stopped, Rinaldi emerged to see 8 South African soldiers approaching with rifles raised. He expected immediate execution. Mussolini's broadcasts had warned that British forces shot Italian mechanics to prevent knowledge transfer. Instead, a lieutenant addressed him in flawless Italian. "We understand you're the chief mechanic for this squadron. We need information about your aircraft maintenance protocols." The South African officer showed Rinaldi a notepad listing every aircraft component the British had struggled to maintain in desert conditions. This wasn't an interrogation for military secrets, but a professional consultation. During the 37-kilometer transport to the British field headquarters, Rinaldi observed 3 motor pool repair stations along the route. Each operated with standardized tool sets, sheltered from the sun by canvas awnings, with organized parts storage and maintenance logs visible on clipboards. The contrasting efficiency stunned him. At British Field Maintenance Unit 217, Rinaldi witnessed 4 hurricanes undergoing simultaneous maintenance, each with dedicated crew and parts readily available. The British maintained a 72% operational readiness rate despite desert conditions. The Italian squadrons had struggled to keep 41% of aircraft serviceable with the same environmental challenges. The prisoner processing followed Geneva Convention protocols precisely. British quartermasters recorded Rinaldi's name, rank, and technical specialization with particular interest in his 3-year training at Caserta. The interrogation officer, Captain Whitfield, spent less time asking about Italian military positions than discussing specific maintenance challenges of Italian Piaggio engines. When Rinaldi mentioned his expertise with reduction gears, the officer made detailed notes rather than dismissing the information. That evening, 41 captured Italian mechanics huddled in a prisoner compound, sharing whispered observations about British operations. Giovanni Bellusci, formerly chief mechanic for the 79th Fighter Group, described seeing a supply convoy arrive with 12 packaged Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. "They replace entire engines rather than rebuilding them in the field," he whispered incredulously. "They must have manufacturing capacity beyond anything we imagined." The British guards distributed standard prisoner rations, canned meat, tea with sugar, white bread with jam, food items that had disappeared from Italian military supplies months earlier. The nutritional contrast highlighted deeper disparities between the opposing forces. On the 3rd day of captivity, 5 senior Italian mechanics, including Rinaldi, were summoned to the commander's office. They walked past a maintenance hangar, where they glimpsed the unmistakable elliptical wings of a supermarine Spitfire undergoing repair. The squadron markings indicated it belonged to number 145 Squadron RAF, which had been particularly effective against Italian formations. The mechanics exchanged nervous glances, wondering if they would be interrogated about the most effective tactics against this legendary aircraft. Inside the office, Wing Commander Harris studied them thoughtfully before speaking through an interpreter. "Gentlemen, we have a proposition that might interest you. We're short on mechanics with advanced training. Our aircraft require constant maintenance in these conditions." He paused, allowing the interpreter to catch up. "Rather than sitting idle in a prison camp, would you consider voluntary work maintaining our aircraft under supervision? You would be compensated according to Geneva Conventions and receive additional rations." The Italian mechanics stood in stunned silence, the proposition contradicting everything they expected. Work on enemy aircraft? The very machines they had been taught to fear and destroy. The idea seemed absurd, possibly treasonous, yet the prospect of practicing their craft, rather than wasting away in desert prison camps, created immediate internal conflict. They had been prepared for capture, interrogation, even mistreatment, but not for respect for their technical abilities. Rinaldi found himself wondering what British engineering might reveal. The Spitfires' performance specifications had seemed like propaganda exaggerations. Now he might discover the truth with his own hands. The tension of decision hung in the air as 5 Italian mechanics confronted a choice that would ultimately transform not just their war experience, but their fundamental understanding of both nations' capabilities. July 1942, RAF Maintenance Unit 109, Egypt. The tightly organized rows of aircraft awaiting repair stretched across the airfield in precise lines, a visual testament to British organizational discipline. 27 Hurricanes, 14 Spitfires, and 9 Beaufighters sat in various states of disassembly as overtaxed ground crews worked through punishing 43 degrees heat. Squadron leader James Mitchell reviewed the maintenance logs with growing concern. His unit, designed to service 35 aircraft monthly, now faced a backlog of 50, with new battle-damaged planes arriving daily from the front lines near El Alamein. British North African maintenance operations struggled under the dual pressures of desert conditions and personnel shortages. RAF records from summer 1942 documented 12,547 maintenance hours required monthly at forward airfields, with available personnel capacity at only 8,215 hours. The mathematics of deficit were written in grounded aircraft and exhausted crews. Across the theatre, the RAF maintained a mechanic-to-aircraft ratio of 7.3, well below the operational standard of 11. At the same time, aircraft turnaround requirements had increased by 34% as Montgomery prepared for major offensive operations. Mitchell walked past his maintenance chief, Flight Sergeant Willis, who had slept only 11 hours over the past 3 days. Willis supervised 4 men struggling to replace a Merlin engine whose bearings had been damaged by sand infiltration. The procedure normally required 6 trained mechanics. "We're losing the maintenance war, sir," Willis said, wiping grime from reddened eyes. "The pilots are flying the wings off these birds faster than we can mend them." The convoy of 3 Bedford trucks arrived at AO 9:30 hours, carrying an unusual cargo. 17 Italian aircraft mechanics under guard, part of the prisoner group from Tobruk. Mitchell had initially opposed the experimental program, viewing it as a security risk. "These men were servicing the very aircraft shooting at our boys last week," he had argued at headquarters. The personnel officer had replied with simple mathematics. "We need 173 additional skilled mechanics across North Africa. We have 241 captured Italian aircraft technicians with verified credentials. We either use them or we lose aircraft." The Italian mechanics stood uncertainly in the morning heat as Mitchell addressed them through an interpreter. "You are here voluntarily under the terms of the Geneva Convention, Article 27, which permits prisoners to work in non-combat roles," he explained. "You will be paid 1 shilling and 6 pence daily, receive standard RAF rations and work 8-hour shifts. You will not be required to service weapon systems or work on aircraft actively engaged in combat operations against your countrymen." He paused, studying their expressions. "You may withdraw your consent at any time and return to standard prisoner status." The lead mechanic, Technical Sergeant Vittorio Gallo, formerly of the 364th Squadron Regia Aeronautica, stepped forward. "We understand the arrangement, Commander, but we must know, will we be considered traitors by our comrades?" His question revealed the central psychological conflict: professional pride versus national loyalty. Mitchell's response was practical rather than political. "You'll be repairing training aircraft and transport planes initially, not fighters. Your work will focus on engines, hydraulics, and control surfaces, skills any aircraft mechanic would use regardless of nationality. Technical expertise isn't treason, Sergeant." RAF security officers had carefully considered the risks. Maintenance logs show that Italian mechanics were initially assigned to non-critical aircraft, positioned where sabotage would be easily detected. Each Italian worked alongside 2 British mechanics. Tools were counted before and after shifts. Critical components required British inspection before installation. These protocols reflected pragmatic caution rather than distrust, gradually relaxing as mutual respect developed. The first assignment came that afternoon: a Bristol Bow fighter with overheating engines that had stumped British mechanics for 3 days. Gallo and 2 other Italians examined the cooling system, conversing rapidly in technical Italian that their guards couldn't follow. Within hours, they identified the problem. Fine sand had created microfractures in the radiator mounting, causing misalignment under heat expansion. It was a failure mode they had frequently encountered with Italian aircraft. "We see this problem with Macchi C.202s, Gallo explained through the interpreter. "The solution is to modify the mounting bracket with reinforcement here and here." He sketched the design quickly on a maintenance form. The British maintenance chief studied it, recognizing solid engineering principles that transcended national boundaries. British records indicate that 78% of Italian mechanics initially volunteered for maintenance duties, with participation rising to 94% by October 1942. Their motives combined multiple factors: better living conditions compared to standard POW camps, professional pride, and the fundamental desire of craftsmen to practice their skills. Technical Sergeant Michel Paroli later wrote in a censored letter home, "I am still working with aircraft engines. I cannot say more, but I am treated with respect for my abilities. The British understand what it means to be a mechanic." As Italian mechanics settled into the routine of RAF maintenance operations, their technical vocabulary expanded to include English terms: spanner for wrench, petrol for fuel, bonnet for engine cowling. The hybrid technical language developing in the hangars reflected a deeper phenomenon: mechanical expertise, creating connections that transcended national divisions. By mid-August, a crucial moment arrived. Flight Lieutenant Phillips approached Gallo's team working on transport aircraft. "We have a situation," he said, hesitation evident in his voice. 3 Spitfires returned damaged from patrol. Our primary maintenance crew is occupied with an urgent Wellington bomber repair." He paused before continuing. "Would your team be willing to examine the Spitfires? Not weapon systems, just engine and control surface damage." The Italian mechanics exchanged glances. The legendary Spitfire representing both the enemy and the pinnacle of aircraft design they had never examined closely. Professional curiosity battled with patriotic reluctance. After a moment, Gallo nodded. "We would be interested to see how these famous aircraft are constructed." As they approached the first Spitfire, its elliptical wings gleaming in the desert sun, none of the Italians could have anticipated how profoundly this encounter would transform their understanding of both aircraft design and the nations that produced them. August 1942, RAF Maintenance Unit 109, Egypt. Vittorio Gallo's hands trembled slightly as he removed the engine cowling from the Spitfire MKV. The Rolls-Royce Merlin 45 engine revealed itself. 12 cylinders arranged in perfect V formation, 27 litres displacement, capable of generating 1,470 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. He had read about this engine in intelligence briefings, but seeing it firsthand was entirely different. Its construction showed precision beyond anything he had encountered in Italian aircraft. Each component fit with tolerances measured in hundredths of millimeters, not the close enough standard of Italian manufacturing. The cooling system is completely different from our Macchi C.202, Gallo explained to his Italian colleagues. Look at how they've designed the radiator ducting. The air intake creates a slight pressurization effect. He ran his finger along the smooth aluminum channels. The Macchi's Daimler-Benz engine, while powerful at 1,175 horsepower, required constant adjustment and frequently overheated in desert conditions. This Merlin, despite generating 25% more power, showed superior heat management through engineered efficiency rather than increased component size. British maintenance records from August-September 1942 show remarkable statistics. Aircraft serviced by mixed British-Italian teams returned to operational status 37% faster than those handled by understaffed British crews alone. The Italian mechanics brought specialized experience with desert conditions that complemented British technical knowledge. A Spitfire squadron that had previously maintained 61% operational readiness achieved 74% within 3 weeks of Italian integration into maintenance teams. The supply chain revelations proved equally stunning to the Italian mechanics. At their Tobruk base, replacement parts had arrived irregularly, often incorrect or damaged. Here, standardized crates delivered precisely catalogued components on predictable schedules. When Gallo requested a replacement hydraulic pump for a damaged Spitfire, the parts clerk simply consulted a logbook, located the exact serial numbered component on organized shelves, and handed it over with accompanying installation specifications, all within 7 minutes. "How can you maintain such inventory in desert conditions?" Gallo asked Flight Sergeant Willis. "Nothing special about it," Willis replied, puzzled by the question. "Standard RAF Supply Procedure Manual, Section 4, same system we use everywhere from England to Singapore." This systematic approach extended to every aspect of aircraft maintenance. Italian mechanics accustomed to improvisation and make-do solutions discovered detailed maintenance protocols that left nothing to chance. RAF Technical Manual LF-SPT 42B specified exact torque settings for every fastener on the Spitfire, with different values based on material, location, and stress factors. Italian mechanics had typically relied on feel and experience. Technical Sergeant Pietro Lombardi, formerly a designer at Fiat's aviation division, examined the Spitfire's wing structure with growing amazement. "The elliptical design isn't just for aesthetics," he explained to his colleagues. "It creates nearly ideal lift distribution across the entire span." He traced the internal spar arrangement. "And look at these lightning holes, perfectly placed to reduce weight while maintaining structural integrity." The wing weighed 172 kilograms less than a comparable Italian design, while handling higher stress loads. On September 17, 1942, a critical moment occurred that RAF maintenance logs recorded with clinical brevity. Italian technical personnel identified fault in Spitfire KL-347 fuel delivery system not apparent through standard inspection protocols. What the dry report didn't capture was the scene in Hangar 3 that afternoon. 3 British mechanics had spent 7 hours trying to diagnose intermittent engine cutout in a Spitfire that had nearly cost a pilot his life during landing. Their diagnostic equipment showed no obvious faults. Gallo, observing quietly from several meters away, finally approached. "May I suggest something?" he asked hesitantly. When granted permission, he removed the main fuel line and blew through it gently, then held it up to the desert sunlight. "There, you see it." A barely perceptible ripple in the metal tubing indicated a partial collapse that would restrict fuel flow under certain G-forces but appear normal under static testing. "How did you spot that?" asked the astonished British chief mechanic. We had this exact problem with the Macchi C.202 last year, Gallo explained. Our fuel lines used slightly thinner aluminum to save weight. Eventually, we learned to identify the pattern. The British maintenance officer called over his squadron leader, who examined the issue. "Implement this inspection on all aircraft immediately," he ordered. "This could have cost us planes and pilots." Turning to Gallo, he added something unprecedented. "Excellent work, Sergeant. The RAF appreciates your expertise." That simple professional acknowledgement, being valued for skill rather than nationality, marked a psychological turning point. British maintenance logs from subsequent weeks show Italian mechanics increasingly integrated into critical aircraft systems. Trust born of demonstrated competence gradually replaced security protocols based on assumed sabotage risk. As September ended, an informal celebration occurred when the 100th aircraft repaired with Italian assistance returned to service. The British maintenance crew invited their Italian counterparts to watch as the Spitfire took off for a test flight, climbing rapidly into the blue Egyptian sky. No one spoke as the aircraft performed a perfect victory roll before heading back to its squadron. "That's your work up there," Flight Sergeant Willis told Gallo. "British design, Italian expertise. Not a bad combination, is it?" The Italian mechanics watched the aircraft disappear toward the front lines, their professional pride now complicated by an uncomfortable realization. They had helped make this machine of war more effective, potentially against their own countrymen. Yet they also felt genuine satisfaction in quality craftsmanship, appreciated by fellow technicians who spoke the universal language of engineering excellence. By October 1942, the transformation was becoming irreversible. Italian mechanics who had arrived as reluctant enemies were evolving into respected colleagues. Their hands still showed the same calluses and oil stains, but they now worked with greater precision, following documented procedures rather than improvising solutions. The cultural exchange was reshaping both their technical understanding and their perspective on which system, British or Italian, truly valued the craftsman's expertise. November 1942. RAF Forward Maintenance Unit 213, Libya. The pre-dawn routine had become second nature to the Italian mechanics. They rose at 0500 hours, consumed a breakfast of porridge, tea with sugar and occasional eggs, protein-rich meals that their own air force had rarely provided even before supply shortages. By 0600, they stood in formation for a brief roll call before British guards escorted them to maintenance hangars where aircraft awaited their attention. No longer did the guards maintain constant watch. They simply delivered the mechanics and returned 8 hours later. The integration into daily operations had progressed with remarkable speed. British maintenance records document this transformation quantitatively. Average aircraft repair time decreased from 86 hours to 51 hours at bases utilizing Italian expertise. Operational readiness rates across the North African theatre improved from 67% to 82% within 3 months of program implementation. A Spitfire squadron that had previously managed 16 serviceable aircraft from a complement of 24 now regularly maintained 20 operational fighters, a critical difference during the intense air operations supporting Montgomery's offensive. Inside Hangar 2, Technical Sergeant Marco Esposito leaned over a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, carefully adjusting valve clearances using a precision feeler gauge marked in thousandths of an inch. He called out measurements in a hybrid language that had developed organically among the maintenance crews. "Valvola numero 3, clearance perfetto. Numero 4 needs adjustment, 3 thou." His British counterpart understood perfectly, handing him a specialized wrench from the immaculately organized toolboard where each item had its silhouetted place. The pidgin language of aircraft maintenance, part English, part Italian, heavily technical, had evolved into a functional dialect that bridged national divisions. British mechanics learned Italian terms like veloce for quick adjustments and attenzione for careful inspection. Italians adopted English spanners instead of wrenches and petrol rather than benzina. More significantly, both groups began using the same hand gestures and visual cues that transcended verbal communication entirely. Flight Lieutenant Parker wants this spit ready by 1400 hours, the British crew chief informed Esposito's team. Oil consumption issue during combat maneuvers. The assignment reflected complete integration. This wasn't a training aircraft or transport plane, but a frontline fighter scheduled for immediate return to combat operations. The Italian team's responsibility had expanded from basic maintenance to mission-critical repairs that British pilots' lives would depend upon. RAF Squadron 417's maintenance log for November 12, 1942, records this evolution matter-of-factly. Spitfire MH271, complete engine seal replacement performed by Technical Sergeant Esposito, Italian POW, and team. Test flight confirms resolution of oil consumption issue. Aircraft return to operational status. The entry made no special notation of the mechanic's nationality. Professional competence had rendered it irrelevant. The knowledge exchange flowed bidirectionally. British technicians taught Italians the intricacies of the Rolls-Royce Merlin, particularly its two-stage supercharger that delivered superior high-altitude performance. In return, Italians shared insights from Fiat and Macchi manufacturing about lightweight aluminum fabrication techniques that British engineers found innovative. Squadron leader Mitchell documented this unexpected benefit in his monthly report. Italian mechanic personnel possessed technical approaches sometimes superior to standard RAF procedures, particularly regarding weight reduction and field repairs under adverse conditions. The collaborative environment fostered unexpected efficiency. When the first autumn storms swept across the desert, Spitfires developed ignition problems from moisture infiltration. Italian mechanics from Sicily, familiar with similar Mediterranean weather patterns, demonstrated a waterproofing technique using locally sourced materials that hadn't occurred to British technicians trained in England's different climate. The technique was subsequently adopted as standard procedure across RAF desert operations. In December 1942, a crucial test of trust occurred when a night raid damaged Hangar 3, creating an emergency situation. Flight Sergeant Willis made an unprecedented decision. He issued toolbox keys to 5 senior Italian mechanics, allowing them independent access to complete necessary repairs without British supervision. This small act of trust, giving enemy prisoners unfettered access to critical aircraft, marked complete professional integration. The following morning's inspection found all aircraft properly serviced with detailed maintenance logs, properly completed in the Italians' increasingly competent English. Personal relationships developed beyond professional respect. British mechanics invited Italians to evening card games, sharing cigarettes and swapping stories through limited shared vocabulary. The Italians taught their British counterparts traditional card games like Scopa and introduced them to the proper preparation of coffee using grounds smuggled from mess hall supplies. The British shared cherished chocolate bars from care packages and photographs of families and hometowns. These human connections transcended the artificial boundaries of wartime nationalism. Technical Sergeant Gallo's mechanical aptitude earned him particular respect. When a Beaufighter arrived with experimental modifications to its Bristol Hercules engines, the British engineering officer specifically requested Gallo's assistance with testing. "He understands radial engines better than anyone in this unit," the officer noted in his requisition. This professional acknowledgement, valuing expertise regardless of uniform, profoundly affected the Italians' psychological orientation toward their captivity and their former allegiances. By January 1943, the program's success prompted expansion. RAF records document 341 Italian mechanics working across 17 maintenance facilities from Egypt to Tunisia. Their contributions became increasingly vital as the Allied offensive pushed westward, creating longer supply lines and maintenance challenges. A confidential assessment from Air Vice Marshal Conyngham acknowledged, "The Italian mechanic program has proven unexpectedly valuable to maintenance operations. Their technical competence equals our own personnel in most respects, and their familiarity with desert conditions sometimes exceeds it." This unlikely collaboration produced measurable results. British combat squadrons maintained 27% higher operational aircraft availability than comparable Italian units had achieved with similar resources. The statistical reality that democratic Britain enabled more efficient technical operations than fascist Italy, despite identical environmental challenges, quietly undermined the ideological foundations of the mechanics' former allegiance. As Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Sicily, Technical Sergeant Gallo approached squadron leader Mitchell with an unprecedented request. "We have been discussing among ourselves," he said carefully. "If operations move to Sicily, to our homeland, would it be possible for us to continue our work? There are many more like us who would help if given the opportunity." The question revealed how completely the transformation had occurred, from captured enemies to volunteer participants in the Allied technical effort. Mitchell's response was equally significant. "I'll forward your request to command. Your work here has been most valuable to the RAF." The simple acknowledgement of worth, of being valued for skill rather than nationality or ideology, completed a profound psychological journey from fascist indoctrination to professional recognition within a democratic system. March 1943. RAF Maintenance Unit 328, Tunisia. Technical Sergeant Gallo stood motionless before the open maintenance manual for the Spitfire Macchi 9. The technical drawings revealed details that would have been classified as top secret just months earlier. The new two-stage supercharger design that allowed the Merlin 61 engine to generate 1,565 horsepower represented British engineering at its finest. Beside this manual sat his worn notebook containing observations about the Macchi C.205, the newest Italian fighter with its 1,475 horsepower Daimler-Benz engine. The performance gap between the aircraft had narrowed on paper, but Gallo now understood the profound difference beyond the specifications. "It's not just about the design," he explained to fellow mechanic Esposito during their lunch break. "The British produce engines with consistent tolerances of 0.005 of a millimetre. Our factories struggle to maintain 0.002 of a millimetre." He sipped tea with sugar, once a foreign habit, now familiar comfort. "And look at their production numbers." He gestured toward the airfield where 6 new Spitfires had arrived that morning, factory fresh and gleaming. RAF records confirm that Britain produced 6,479 Spitfires in 1942 alone, against Italy's total wartime production of 1,830 Macchi C.202 fighters. The mathematics of industrial capacity were undeniable. This revelation extended beyond aircraft. The Italian mechanics' exposure to British logistics systematically dismantled fascist propaganda about respective national capabilities. British supply chains delivered standardized parts to desert airfields with remarkable consistency. Meanwhile, letters from family, heavily censored but revealing in their omissions, described worsening conditions across Italy. A mechanic from Milan received news that the Breda factory, where he had worked, now operated at 37% capacity due to material shortages. Another learned that civilian food rations in Naples had been reduced to 100 calories daily. By contrast, Italian POWs working as mechanics received full British military rations of 3,400 calories daily. The contrast between expectation and reality created profound psychological impact. Intelligence officer Captain Thornfield documented this transformation in his April 1943 assessment. Italian technical personnel have undergone remarkable attitudinal shift. Initial caution and suspicion have largely been replaced by professional engagement and frequently expressed admiration for RAF systems and equipment. Many now openly question information they received from official Italian sources regarding British capabilities. This ideological transformation accelerated after the screening of newsreel footage showing Allied bombing of Italian industrial centres. The mechanics watched in silence as factories they recognized suffered precision attacks. Rather than generating anger, many experienced conflicting emotions, recognizing the military necessity while questioning the leadership that had placed Italy in opposition to clearly superior industrial powers. The statistical reality was inescapable. By spring 1943, Allied air forces conducted bombing raids with 800-plus aircraft simultaneously, while the entire Regia Aeronautica struggled to maintain 200 operational aircraft across all theatres. Perhaps the most powerful transformation occurred through direct participation in successful operations. As Allied forces pushed toward Tunis, the mechanics maintained aircraft that returned with victory markings. Maintenance Chief Willis observed Gallo watching a Spitfire he had repaired return safely from combat operations. "That pilot made it home because of your work on his oxygen system," Willis noted. The simple statement, acknowledging Gallo's role in preserving life, even of those technically still enemies, created complex emotional impact. RAF pilot survival rates increased measurably at bases employing Italian mechanics, with emergency repairs often incorporating techniques developed through Italian experience with battle damage. The mechanics' technical letters home, heavily censored yet revealing, documented this evolution. Sergeant Lombardi wrote to his brother in Turin, "I continue to work with engines. The engineering principles here are remarkable. After the war, we must consider whether our approach to precision manufacturing requires fundamental reconsideration." The letter's subtext was clear to those who understood engineering culture. British technical systems were superior to those the fascist regime had claimed represented the pinnacle of Italian industrial achievement. By May 1943, the program had expanded dramatically. Military records confirmed 742 Italian mechanics working across North African maintenance facilities, with particular concentration at units supporting the Sicily invasion preparations. Their technical contributions became increasingly significant as the Mediterranean campaign intensified. A confidential RAF assessment acknowledged, "Italian technical personnel now constitute approximately 23% of our qualified maintenance workforce in theatre. Their performance metrics match or exceed those of regular RAF ground crews in most categories, particularly in expedient battle damage repair." The most profound evidence of transformation emerged during the preparations for Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. When intelligence officers briefed Italian mechanics from Sicilian towns regarding military objectives, they provided detailed information about their home regions. Rather than demonstrating resistance, many offered additional technical information about local airfields, including fuel storage locations and maintenance facility details that weren't documented in British intelligence. This willing provision of information about their homeland represented complete ideological transformation, from fascist loyalty to active support for Allied liberation. In a particularly powerful moment captured in Captain Thornfield's May 23rd report, Technical Sergeant Rinaldi approached him with a hand-drawn map of his hometown airfield near Catania. "The main fuel depot is here, not where your maps show it," he explained quietly. "And if your forces capture these maintenance hangars intact, there are approximately 26 engines in various states of repair that could be useful." When Thornfield asked why he would provide this information, Rinaldi's response revealed the depth of transformation. "My family lives 3 kilometers from that airfield. I want this war to end with minimal destruction. The sooner your forces succeed, the sooner they'll be safe." As the Sicily invasion date approached, Italian mechanics actively requested to accompany Allied forces as technical advisors. Wing Commander Harris documented this unprecedented development. "We now face the extraordinary situation of former enemy personnel volunteering to assist our technical operations on Italian soil. Their motivation appears genuine. Many expressed desire to apply British organisational systems to rebuild their national aviation infrastructure post-conflict." A British intelligence assessment dated June 12, 1943, captured the programme's unexpected success. The Italian Mechanic Initiative has transcended its original pragmatic objectives to become perhaps our most successful psychological operation, despite never being intended as such. Through direct exposure to British technical systems and democratic organisational principles, we have effectively converted former fascist adherents into advocates for Allied approach. They represent a valuable potential cadre for post-war reconstruction. By July 1943, as the first Allied aircraft landed on Sicilian airfields, they were sometimes met by an extraordinary sight. Italian mechanics in British-issued coveralls, ready to establish maintenance operations for the aircraft they had once tried to shoot down. Their journey from captured enemies to technical collaborators was complete, their transformation shaped not by propaganda, but by the irrefutable evidence of their own hands on British engineering excellence. September 1945. Milan Aircraft Works, Italy. The bright yellow RAF maintenance manual sat open on Paolo Rinaldi's desk, its dog-eared pages and oil stains testifying to years of regular consultation. Now technical director for the restructured civilian aircraft facility, Rinaldi had returned to Italy with more than memories. He carried British organizational systems, maintenance protocols, and engineering principles that would reshape Italian aviation. Across the rebuilt factory floor, 23 former POW mechanics supervised production lines using techniques learned while maintaining Spitfires in the North African desert. The impact of these returned mechanics extended far beyond a single factory. Military records document that 837 Italian aircraft mechanics worked with the RAF during the war. Upon repatriation, 84% entered the post-war aviation industry, bringing transformation through practical knowledge rather than theoretical instruction. They became the essential human infrastructure for Italy's aeronautical resurrection, carrying institutional knowledge that survived despite the destruction of physical factories. The technical legacy manifested in measurable improvements. Macchi's first post-war aircraft design implemented standardization protocols modeled directly on RAF systems. Component interchangeability reached 93% compared to pre-war levels of 67%. Manufacturing tolerances tightened from 0.2 to 0.05 of a millimeter. These weren't abstract improvements but practical implementations by men who had witnessed firsthand how precision engineering translated into aircraft reliability and pilot survival. Vittorio Gallo, now chief engineer at Fiat's aviation division, instituted a complete reorganization of production methods. "Before my British experience, we designed for theoretical performance," he explained to visiting American industrialists in 1947. "Now, we design for maintainability first." This philosophical shift, prioritizing the mechanic's ability to service the aircraft under field conditions, came directly from his time maintaining battle-damaged Spitfires with limited resources. Fiat's new technical manuals resembled RAF documents in format, organization, and emphasis on standardized procedures. Personal testimonials reveal how profoundly the experience transformed individual trajectories. Marco Esposito, who had entered the war as a reserved technical specialist with unquestioning loyalty to Mussolini, became an outspoken advocate for technical education reform. "Italy's future lies not in grand ideologies but in practical competence," he frequently stated in industry publications. His technical school in Naples, established in 1948, explicitly incorporated British engineering principles and democratic organizational structures where student mechanics participated in curriculum development. The physical evidence of transformation appeared throughout post-war Italian aviation. Technical drawings from Piaggio's 1946 civil aircraft prototypes show direct adaptation of British design elements, particularly standardized access panels and maintenance-friendly component layouts that Rinaldi and colleagues had admired in Spitfires. Industry publications acknowledged this influence, with Aviation Technology Italy noting in March 1947, "Our returning technical personnel have implemented significant procedural improvements based on Allied practices, particularly British organizational systems." The knowledge transfer extended beyond technical details to encompass broader industrial philosophy. Pietro Lombardi, appointed to the post-war Aviation Reconstruction Committee, advocated successfully for quality control systems modeled on RAF standards. His committee report stated explicitly, "The British achievement of high reliability through systematic inspection and standardized procedures demonstrates a superior approach to mass production that Italian industry must adopt. The report detailed specific RAF practices witnessed by former POW mechanics, including statistical sampling methods and calibration protocols. British observers noted this unexpected legacy. Air Commodore Whitfield, visiting Italian facilities in 1949, wrote, "It is remarkable to observe our maintenance systems reproduced in these rebuilt Italian factories. Their technical directors, frequently former POWs who maintained our aircraft, have essentially transplanted RAF organizational culture into Italian soil, where it appears to be flourishing. The transformation transcended generations through deliberate knowledge transmission." Technical Sergeant Rinaldi's son, Giuseppe, entered the aviation industry in 1957, trained by his father in British-derived methodologies. By 1965, 17 sons of former POW mechanics held senior positions in Italian aerospace companies. This second generation, raised on stories of British engineering excellence, maintained the technical connection even as the war receded into history. Giuseppe later recalled, "My childhood education included my father showing me the proper way to organize tools like the British taught me." These weren't just technical lessons, but philosophical ones about order, precision, and systems thinking. The statistical legacy of this knowledge transfer became increasingly evident as Italy's aviation industry recovered. By 1955, Italian aircraft manufacturing had achieved component reliability rates of 97.2%, compared to pre-war figures of 82.4%. Production efficiency increased by 41%, while reducing material waste by 23%. These improvements correlated directly with regions employing significant numbers of mechanics with British wartime experience. Perhaps most significantly, the former POW mechanics fundamentally altered Italian technical culture. The pre-war emphasis on flamboyant design and theoretical performance gave way to British-influenced values: reliability, maintainability, and systematic documentation. Aviation historian Roberto Gentile observed in his 1972 analysis, "Italy's post-war aviation renaissance reflected not just economic recovery, but philosophical transformation. The mechanics who maintained Spitfires as prisoners returned with more than technical knowledge. They brought an entirely different conception of how technological systems should function in a modern democracy." This cultural shift extended to civilian applications. When Lombardi established Italy's first modern aircraft maintenance certification program in 1952, he explicitly based requirements on RAF standards he had learned during captivity. "The British showed us that maintenance isn't subordinate to design, but equal in importance," he explained in the program's founding documents. This represents not just technical reality, but democratic values. The mechanic's practical knowledge holds equal standing with the engineer's theoretical expertise. Former RAF personnel sometimes encountered their unexpected legacy while visiting post-war Italy. Flight Lieutenant Edwards, touring an Italian aircraft factory in 1958, recognized maintenance diagrams identical to those he had used during the war. The Italian production manager, upon learning Edwards had served with RAF Maintenance Unit 328, embraced him warmly. "I maintained your Spitfires in Tunisia. Now I build our aircraft using everything you taught us." The transformation came full circle in 1961, when a joint Anglo-Italian aviation venture was established. Among the Italian technical directors were 7 former POW mechanics who had maintained Spitfires. The British partners found themselves collaborating with men whose first exposure to British engineering had come as captive enemies. Now they met as equal partners, their shared technical language transcending the artificial barriers of nationality. An elderly Vittorio Gallo, interviewed for a documentary in 1982, reflected on his journey. "When British officers first asked us to repair their Spitfires, we thought it was merely practical necessity. We didn't realize it was the beginning of our education. They showed us a different way to build aircraft, yes, but more importantly, they showed us a different way to organize society. The precision, standardization, and reliability weren't just engineering principles, but social ones. We learned that technical excellence requires certain values: honesty in documentation, respect for evidence, concern for the end user. These are also the foundations of democracy. His simple conclusion encapsulated the unexpected legacy of Italian mechanics who had been shocked when British soldiers asked them to fix Spitfires. They thought they were just teaching us about aircraft maintenance. In reality, they were teaching us how to rebuild our nation.